Hi guys, and welcome. Today I'm going to take you through how I use these hold down clamps to secure my work to the table, as well as a few of my other favourites that I use when these here just aren't up to the job. On the table here I've set up a selection of materials and different ways that these holding clamps can be used to hold them down. Starting here we have 3mm or 1/8, then we've got 1/2 inch or 12mm, 3/4 inch or 18mm, and 1 inch, 25mm. The 3/4 inch piece of stock I've got held using 3 different methods. The first is using a block on its own. The second is using a block with another holding block just under the back edge of it. That just makes the angle here a little bit shallower. Lastly, on the edge of my table, because I've got a large drop off here, I've got one block on its edge just under the back edge of this clamp here, and I'm using that to hold it down. Now that's in there good and solid. That just isn't going anywhere no matter how much force I put on it. On a piece of 1 inch material you cannot put a holding clamp on its edge like so. The angle is just far too steep. So in this case we just stick another clamp up under the back edge here to try and level this up a bit and clamp it down. When it comes to clamping down 1/2 inch or 12mm stock, then these clamps are just perfect. You don't need to do anything to them other than just sit them on the table and screw them down. Here I'm showing 4 different nut arrangements you can use to hold them down to make your life a bit easier. Obviously just using a standard nut by itself is the quickest, simplest and cheapest method. A wing nut's nice and simple, or you can cut out some fancy knobs and just insert a nut into them. Just have a look at my previous video I did on making knobs, and you should be able to find the plan for this one here and there. Just one word of caution though, when clamping down the nut here, it is easy to go overboard with a spanner and put too much pressure on it. So you can break them. This is only the second one of these that I've ever broken in the last 3 years of using these, and it was done clamping it down with a spanner. There could have been a bit of weakness in this, or I could have just overdone it. But you'll note, even though it's broken, I still have another clamping edge here I can still use. So it's not a complete throwaway item. Plus you can also use it as packing, as I've shown on the previous clamping examples. When it comes to clamping stock thinner than 3/8 or 10mm, these blocks can still do the job. It's simply a matter of turning the block upside down and clamping it down as shown here. This little cutout here has the advantage that if you're using a short cutter, as I do quite often, I can get that little bit closer without having to worry about the collet hitting the body of the clamp. So one of the most useful accessories you can have to go with your blocks are these here, a selection of bolts of different lengths. Now you might say, why don't I just get a long bolt and be done with it, and then one size fits all. Well, the problem is, if the longer your bolt here is, you end up with more protruding above the surface of it. And occasionally I've managed to foul the router, not the router cutter, but the actual router body itself on the top of a bolt. So I use the shortest bolt that will allow me to clamp my material down so that it can't foul on the router body. So another use for these clamps is you can use them like this when using this style of clamp. This particular clamp here puts a sideways pressure on this piece of MDF here. You can see that it just bows out. So these blocks here provide reference for my item to slide into, and also provide the back holding so that when I put the pressure on here, this block cannot move. If I was, say, engraving a whole heap of these here, and they're all the same size, Then it's just simply a matter of slide my stock in, clamp it, engrave it, take it out and change it. So yet another use for these very versatile little clamps. So by now you're probably thinking that the sun must shine out of these clamps every orifice, but that's not the case. There are some things these clamps just don't do very well. When it comes to holding a piece of HDPE like this here, I find it gives me a bit of a problem. What normally happens is these clamps just can't hold it in place and it'll slip out of the way as it's cutting. That could be because I'm using the clamps upside down, or it could be that this stuff is quite slippery. So my solution to it is, I still use the clamps to clamp it down, but I just simply put a nail or two in it, like so, one on each side or one at each corner, and that stops it any sideways movement. After that, it will cut perfectly well, and I can just take my nail out when I'm finished. One of the other clamping arrangements I've made is this one here. It's nothing but a piece of wood with a rebate cut into it and some holes to put some bolts through. This here has the advantage that it can hold the material flat over a long distance. This would be ideal for a lot thinner material than 3/4 inch MDF. Again, like in the other clamps, if you're clamping a thin material, you can turn the clamp upside down and just put the rebated edge along like so. When making this style here, you either need to put slots in here or accurately drill the holes to match the position of the clamping points on your table. You can see here that I've made one that is actually a bit thinner for clamping thinner material. My last clamp is this one here. For lack of a better name, I'll call it a bar clamp. It's nothing more than a piece of 3/8 inch steel, 25mm wide. A hole drilled at each end, and then just a standard bolt, washer and nut or knob installed on the end. Primarily I use it when I put stock on my table and end up covering up the slots in the center and can't get to them. Most commonly when I put a large sheet on the table, I will use these clamps here. It's really good when doing quite thin material as well. If I put a full sheet of material on here and I only want to machine, say, the front half of it like so, then again I also use these clamps because it means I can clamp part way down the sheet of material, and I can perhaps use ordinary clamps here at the front of it, machine in this area. I don't need to worry about what's going on behind the clamp. Because it's made of steel, of course, I do have to be careful. If I hit this with the cutter, it's not going to be forgiving. Luckily, to date, I haven't managed to do that, but I'm sure at some stage I will manage to run afoul of it. So there you have it, some of the many and varied ways I use these hold down clamps to secure my work to the table, as well as a few of the other ways that I like to use when these just don't do the job. By no means are these the only ways of securing stock to the table. I'm sure everybody has their own personal favourite that suits them and their machine. If you've enjoyed this video, please remember to like it. If you haven't already done so, please remember to subscribe to me on YouTube and follow me on Google+. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Cheers! Bugger.